Here we are, tonight's Ask Me Anything of the Baltimore WordPress Meetup group for September 13th, 2023. This meetup is informational. Please use the information, products, and services that we show at your own risk. Just because we are showing a website, plugin, theme, or any other service is not an official WordPress endorsement of it. As always, please keep it family friendly. Many of us are attending from our own homes, and we have all sorts of family members and people in the background, so we do our best to keep everything nice and family friendly. We will do our best to follow the WordPress guidelines and community standards. That means that if you break these rules, either myself or June will evict you from the meeting. No spamming or spammer-like behavior. We have people of all different skill levels and backgrounds, so no judgment for people who are at a different place in their WordPress journey than where we are at. And of course, don't be a jerk. I am your host for this evening. My name is Jen. I'm a WordPress developer who's been building and managing WordPress sites for clients for over a decade. Over the years, I've built, remodeled, cleaned up, fixed, added functionality to, and done security work on hundreds and hundreds of WordPress sites. And during the pandemic in 2020, I took over organizing the Baltimore WordPress Meetup. If you have questions or need help outside of our meetup time slots, you can visit anfira.com/help for information on where you can find help. And I'm just going to put that link in the chat. Some quick admin. We will be using our Zoom chat for questions and to queue people up. So please go and find your Zoom chats. Make sure it's open, you know where it is, because in just a moment, I'm going to be calling on people and you'll need to answer in the chat. Everyone is muted to start. And when it's your turn, I can unmute you if you would like to answer. You'll receive a request to unmute, and it is your choice if you wish to unmute. You, of course, do not need to unmute if you just want to type in the chat. No one knows everything, but we will do our best to see if we can help everyone out tonight. For those people who have pre-submitted questions, we take pre-submitted questions first, and then once we have gone through the people who have pre-submitted and are here, then we move on to people who didn't pre-submit and just want to ask questions now. So if any of the following people are here, please type here in the chat. David, Joseph, Connie, Alice, Sandra, Ted, Carol, Brian, Paul, Jackie, or Guy. And Alice is here, so we will be starting with Alice. Alice's question I will quickly read off. What templates or themes would you recommend to someone just starting to create a WordPress site? Is it better to export content from a site into WordPress, or create an accessible site, or start from the beginning and just copy and paste content? Well, as usual, the answer is it depends. In terms of starter themes or templates, generally speaking, something like Cadence or Ocean WP is what is usually talked about in terms of getting kind of an accessible start. In terms of exporting content and importing it, it depends on how well the content got exported. If it's nice and clean with nice clean HTML markup, then I would go ahead and import that. If it is a complete mess with the divs and spans and all sorts of inline CSS, then no, that's not going to be a good importing experience. Did you want to add anything, Alice?
Well, again, this is new to me, and I knew about Cadence, and I have found some other themes. My follow-up question now is, it seems that in order to use a theme like Cadence or Astra or something else, even if we have a domain name, we still are having to pay for a WordPress plan. Is that correct?
It has to be hosted somewhere. WordPress.org is a self-hosted WordPress, which means that you must host it yourself somewhere.
And when you say hosting it by yourself, does that mean that the client I'm working with already has a GoDaddy account.
Mm-hmm.
GoDaddy.
We've completely lost your microphone, Alice.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so if you already have an account like with GoDaddy, a hosting site, would you want to do it through them? Or is there a way to do it for free?
There are no good hosts that will give it to you for free because it takes up server space, it utilizes resources. People aren't going to just give you that for free. I don't recommend GoDaddy. Their systems have a lot of problems and their support is generally worse. But you can, of course, set up additional hosting with them, either their managed WordPress or their cPanel hosting services.
And so in order to go forward, even if we have the exported content, we would still need to have some way to host. I'm not sure that the client wants to use something else. Is there a recommendation for a different hosting service?
Yes, I have a blog article actually on it, so give me just a moment. So these are generally the kind of blanket recommendations when I don't really know a whole lot about what you're trying to do or what you might need. I've put the link into the chat, and Eric has also mentioned that he likes Green Geeks as a hosting company. Anyway, it's usually either Cloudways, Flywheel, or Kinsta.
Well, there's two prongs here. One is I'm working on a project of my own that I'm still developing content for. So I'm not ready to go, but if I were to have my own site and a domain name through WordPress, then I would also need a hosting option as
When you
well.
say through WordPress, do you mean WordPress.com?
Well, I'm not sure I understood that there were two different components to WordPress.
There's WordPress.org, which is the self-hosted version of WordPress. And then there's WordPress.com, which is a SaaS solution, which software as a service solution that WordPress.com provides their own hosting.
Okay.
And if you wish to use your own, if you wish to use a WordPress.com domain, they have a basic plan, which is free. If you wish to have your own domain name, you need to pay for their services. And
so in order to get your own domain name, you have to pay. I understand.
Correct.
All right. Well, that's good to know. And is there a disadvantage of using the WordPress hosting, in your opinion?
WordPress.com?
Yes.
WordPress.com is a managed hosting environment. It has specific limitations on what you can and cannot do, and it has specific price points which change what those limitations are. Is the service as a whole good? Generally speaking, yes. But it just depends on how much responsibility versus freedom you want. If you don't want any responsibility and you don't want any freedom, WordPress.com can be great because it takes all of that away from you.
Mm.
But if you want to be able to make modifications and install some of your own stuff, then it's not a good solution.
Mm-hmm. And just for my own knowledge, when someone already has a website, I loved your introduction, and you've gone in to look at it and redo it, especially with accessibility in mind. If they're using a platform already, such as Squarespace, what do you do in that case where it's clear that you're not going to get an accessible end result, but they still need a website? What do you typically do in terms of guiding a client?
I tell them that I can't do accessibility on Squarespace. I don't have any control over the code and the outputs.
Right.
So if they want accessibility done, it's going to move to WordPress. Period.
Right.
End of story.
Right. And so if they are moving to WordPress, and they already own a domain name under GoDaddy, I'm not certain about moving from GoDaddy either. How do you guide that process in terms of moving them away from something that may not be as advantageous as another hosting site?
I don't actually allow clients who are using my services to go with GoDaddy. So
Okay.
I tell them the options that are available to them, and they choose from the options that I provide.
And they would be the ones that you've listed here in your blog. That's great. Thank you so much.
Yes, there's a few others that I do routinely recommend and use. It just depends on the situation and what their need is for whether they're appropriate for a given client. I myself do the majority of hosting on a company called GridPane, but GridPane can be very technical.
Yeah, this needs to be simple, and I think that's why they went with Squarespace in the first place, because it was
Mhm.
easy enough to set up their site. But now going forward, I've joined the team and I'm doing other things besides this, but it's also, moving them in the direction of having an accessible space.
Mhm.
And so you would say to drop GoDaddy and to go with one of the recommended ones that you've used. Is there, when there's an existing site that is still up, um, how does that work without
You
losing?
create a staging site and you build everything up the way you want it, and then when it's ready, you go ahead and launch it.
Right. And I've learned a
I
little
do
bit
need
about.
to wrap this up
Sure.
because we do have quite a few other people here.
I was just
So
about
I
to
am
ask
going to
that.
go ahead and move on.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So next we will ask once again if anyone who pre-submitted their questions is here. I believe that Paul said that he was, so he is up next. I'm going to take a look at my spreadsheet and see what we have for Paul's question. So Paul is still using the classic editor with Elementor to build sites rather than using Gutenberg blocks. Do the sites wind up with code that is more bloated and or slower than if using Gutenberg? Generally speaking, most of the page builders create significantly more code than straight up Gutenberg. So I would say yes, if you're building with Elementor, then you are getting significantly more code than if you were to just build with Gutenberg. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask, Paul, or shall we move on? All right. I will do a quick question to see if anyone else who had pre-submitted is here. David, Joseph, Connie, Sandra, Ted, Carol, Brian, Jackie, or Guy. And Ted is here. All right. So Ted's question, I'm going to go ahead and find it. One of our sites is hosted on WP Engine. They will be upgrading the database to MySQL 8 at the end of October. They say that we cannot test it on our staging site, but we can spin up a duplicate site on our local computers with the local by Flywheel, is what I'm assuming, and test it there. You have used local before, but you feel like that's a lot of trouble to go to. In terms of switching to MySQL 8, I really haven't heard of anyone having any issues. So as long as your plugins and themes are up to date, I probably wouldn't be very concerned. Did you want to unmute and ask anything else? All right, we will go ahead and move on. As Eric said in the chat, if all your plugins and theme are still being updated regularly and are being supported, it is very unlikely to be an issue for you. Since we've gone through all the people who pre-submitted questions, we will now go ahead and take questions from the chat. So if you have a question, go ahead and mention it in the chat. If it is a long question and you would like to talk, you can just put a question mark in the chat and we'll queue you up. If you have a short, quick question, you can just type it into the chat. Jackie. All right, I'll unmute you. There you go.
Yes,
Hi,
hi.
Jackie.
I'm gonna start my video so you can see me.
We don't use video because a lot of people have slower broadcast
okay.
internet, so we don't have video.
Okay, no problem. I submitted a question about using this plugin called sitekit, which was recommended by Google when they were transferring over to their GA4 system this summer.
Yes.
And I wasn't sure how to do the transfer, so eventually I asked them for some help, and I got somebody who advised me that if I'm using WordPress, previously we had the coded header, the Google site key in the header, but before we transferred our site to WordPress. But then in WordPress, we ended up using all-in-one SEO and not Google SEO. But anyway, we did. I did install the site key plugin without any conflicts or problems. It didn't seem to interfere with all-in-one. The issue was that this was supposed to help us with our site statistics, and it has a little dashboard. You can view all the times that people visit your site, what search terms they're using, and it comes with a dashboard that has all the statistics. But now the person I work with doesn't think that we need to use it at all. We do have a Google business page, and a lot of people found us through the business page and bought tickets to attend concert and stuff like that. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if site key is a problem or if it's a privacy issue. She's concerned that it's a privacy issue, that we're collecting data from people. So we have to put that into our privacy policy if we use it. And she's afraid that would deter people from buying tickets and wanting to, if they know that Google's tracking.
Here's the thing. Almost no one actually reads a privacy policy. It is absolutely a legal requirement to have one. It needs to be honest. It needs to be up to date. But the reality is almost no one actually reads one. In terms of GA4, GA4 has not had any legal tests in the European Union, which is the place that had the issues with the original Google Analytics. Since the US and the EU have passed a recent agreement, and I cannot remember the name of the specific agreement, but they have passed a recent agreement which basically allows the data of European citizens to be stored on US servers. The expectation is that the Google Analytics 4 will be able to continue to be used with Europe without much issue. Since I'm guessing that you probably don't actually have much of any traffic from Europe.
Yeah, that's right.
As long as you disclose that you are collecting Google Analytics in your privacy policy, then it's fine. Again, honestly, almost no one is actually going to read it.
So it's not a big concern, right? Is
it
advantageous, do you think, to have these statistics so we can see who visits?
Well, I mean, if you have data, then, if you want to go look back at the data in the future, it's there. If you don't collect any data, then you won't ever, you can't modify what you don't monitor. So if you do wish to be able to use the data or make changes in the future based on data, you can only do that if you have data.
How would it affect our Google business page if we quit using it, the site kit?
As far as I know, it wouldn't affect your Google business page.
Okay, so it's just site specific. We would still have a presence on our business page, and that we would still collect some data through the business page as well. Would that be possible without using it? Or
I honestly don't know exactly what data would be collected through your business page if you don't have analytics on. Google likes to tie all of their services together to share data. So if you turn off the analytics, you may be turning off data in other places.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was afraid of. So that really answers my question. Thank you very much. And I know it was a long question, but thanks for going over all those fine points. I really appreciate it.
All right, next up we have Dino. Dino wants to know what our thoughts are using AI as a code snippet solution, like Invinced, which I'm not familiar with. Let's ask you to unmute as soon as I can find you. Hi,
Hey,
Dino.
Hey, how are you, Jen?
I'm doing okay.
You're always doing okay, Jen. Bless
I try.
you. A quick little wink and a nod. I've had the pleasure of working with Jen over the last year. Very, very professional, very skilled, a great person, and a dog owner. So thanks for all you do, Jen. Yeah, last night on the A11Y NYC podcast or webinar that they put on a monthly basis, it was presented by Evinced, and their whole kind of business proposition is about using code snippets that are built to be accessible and making those snippets available to either design systems and or developers, designers, whatever they might be. It's only web-based right now, but I found the concept very, very interesting because we all know that AI is a double-edged sword. And, that's my last question, right? Like, how dangerous could a little AI really be, Jen?
So, as you of course mentioned, AI is very much a double-edged sword. Generally speaking, where AI does well is when there is a significant volume of good data that it's processed. So, for example, if you were to ask AI to pass something like the LSATs, which is the legal test to get into law school in the US, it would do really well because there is just such an incredible amount of data out there for the LSATs and their questions and passing that. So where AI, I think, is going to be really good at accessibility is when it is hitting really, really common patterns. So for example, when it's hitting things like accordions or even just certain types of buttons, there's just such a large amount of data for those elements that I think AI is going to be able to process that and do a good job with helping us. Where AI is going to start having problems is where it hits some kind of less standard code. So I think that AI is probably going to be terrible at trying to remediate a slider, because sliders are coded so many different ways, almost none of them are accessible, that's a huge problem to solve, whereas something like an accordion is a much more straightforward problem to solve. So I think that AI is going to start getting really helpful at helping us fix the simpler stuff, helping us find that stuff. Where I think it's going to be having problems is with the more complicated things or the less standard coding practices, especially as we start getting into more JavaScript and jQuery and elements that change out and things like that. Does that help at all?
Yeah, you almost verbatim, succinctly summarized the end result last night, which is and you actually even hit a couple of the key points, right? Like buttons, for example. A lot of solutions out there, but in other cases, not so much. So yeah, thanks, Jen. Great.
All right, we are going to move on to the next question. It looks like it is Greta. I will find your name in the list and send you the unmute request. Hi, Greta.
Hi, Jen. Hi, everybody. I was wondering if you could give me some insight into using forms. I'm having a problem with my website and also a client's website with forms. I don't know if it's the form I'm using, or it could be that one of the sites is hosted by your favorite hosting provider, which is GoDaddy. One is GoDaddy's host, and the other one used to be Yahoo Small Business, which is now Verizon.
Oh boy.
One of the one of the forms is WP forms, and the other one I can't recall. But what's happening
Okay.
is every day we're getting swamped with emails with messages from these forms. Yeah, and none of the email addresses are legit, but I don't know why it's happening. And both of the sites are secure with the security certificates. So I don't know if it's the
So
form or the
an
host.
SSL or a website security certificate doesn't do anything to stop spam. It has
Oh.
zero relationship with stopping spam.
Oh.
That only encrypts data between the sender's browser and your server. It doesn't have any effect whatsoever on overall website security or on reducing spam. They're absolutely zero relationship. In
Is there something
terms,
wrong? I'm sorry.
so in terms of actually trying to reduce spam, I am not a fan of WP forms. I'll be honest with you.
I thought that might be it.
I don't particularly like that form system. I have had significantly better success with Fluent forms in terms of having far less spam.
Yeah, I've used them too. I've heard of them. Yeah.
So they have, generally speaking, a lot less spam than some other ones do, but they alone are not going to stop it. What you might also want to look at is WP Armor. There we go. So this is a plugin, WP Armor. So this, a lot of people have had good success with getting rid of it, spam, and really reducing it. And the other one is Anti-Spam Bee. And this, I've had a lot of personal experience with this Anti-Spam Bee. You can see it's got 700,000 plus installs. I personally have had very, very good success with this particular plugin.
Oh, so you get it too. It's just not me. You get it
Pretty
too. It's
much
not just
all
me being a
websites do.
novice.
It's bots that roam the internet and try and submit forms.
For what?
So
You know, it's not like they're going to get anything. It's like really annoying. It's like 10 to 20 a day, and it's like, why are they even doing this? Oh, it's not people. It's just bots
it's
filling out the
bots.
forms.
It is bots. It is not people. So anyway, those two are very good free options. As Eagle mentioned in the chat, there is a service called Clean Talk, and that has basically a giant network of known IP addresses and email addresses that have been used. It's a paid product, but it's very inexpensive. We're talking on the order of about $10 a year. And it can have some negative side effects in terms of a little extra page load, whereas these on-site solutions normally have very little impact on your page load. But that is also an option if you're having issues.
So the WP Armor and Anti-Spam
Bee, yes.
They're both WordPress plugins that I could get.
Correct.
Okay.
Pick one of them, don't pick both.
Which one would you recommend?
I personally use the Bee.
Okay. Thank you. I'll try it.
Yeah. Good luck.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we have come to the end of our questions. So does anyone else have any additional questions? If you would like to be unmuted so that you can ask your question, just put a question mark into the chat. If you have a quick short question, you can go ahead and just drop it into the chat. Zach has a question. He runs a blog site. What are my thoughts on page builders compared to just using WordPress theme functions? I think I need a little more information from you, Zach. So I've sent you a request to unmute.
Hi.
Hi, Zach.
Yeah, I just as far as I know basic HTML and CSS, whatnot. And so I'm just trying to learn a little bit as I go to update or enhance my website. But and I was just wondering, you see a lot of these drag and drop like Elementor and a variety of other page builders. I don't know, it just seems like I don't really trust using those, and I feel like I should learn, I get more knowledge of HTML and designing pages myself versus using a page builder. I'm just kind of skeptical of using those things. And I guess
So-
that's as specific as I can get.
A
Kinda-
lot of people are just using the Gutenberg editor now.
Yeah,
Have you been using that?
yes, that's what I have been using.
So you can do a number of the basic functions of page builders within the Gutenberg editor in terms of,
Yeah.
columns and rows and
Sure.
dropping in elements like that. So that's where quite a few people who don't want to go the full page builder route have gone with Gutenberg and perhaps adding one of the block extensions to add some more blocks or options.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Just essentially what it looks like what I was doing anyway. I just wanted to get some other feedback as well. So I appreciate it.
Yes. Yep. All right. Next up, we have Jamal. I believe I've said that correctly. What resources are good for self-paced learning? That's a broad question. I'm going to ask you if you'd like to unmute. Self-paced learning for what specifically?
I was thinking along the lines of, I guess specifically I'm thinking in terms of kind of designing my own forms or creating more user-friendly forms or things along
So are you
that.
trying to do a form without a form builder, or are you trying to use one of the existing form builders?
I was, I guess, trying to get an idea of which ones are recommended and maybe be able to try out a few different ones to know if there's one that might work better in certain use cases.
Are you specifically looking for something that has a free option, or do you care if it has a paid option only?
I guess I'm more interested in the free options.
Okay, so I had previously mentioned a form called Fluent Forms. So this here is Fluent Forms, and they have a massive amount of documentation on their website, which goes through a ton of different use cases, a ton of different configurations and whatnot for building out different forms for different purposes. Another one is this WS form. And I actually know the person who owns this company. And they also have a huge amount of documentation available on their website. Personally, I prefer the setup and the way that Fluent Forms kind of has their back-end editor done to how the WS form has it set up. It's one of those things that ends up being a personal preference. But I know that WS Forms did an entire podcast series on the WP Builds podcast. And in that, they go through just a ton of information about the different ways that forms can be used. It's probably a month or two back. Apparently it's further back than I thought. But anyway, they had a whole set of things on the WS forms. There we are. So they did that. It was like I think 6-episode series. And he goes into all sorts of different things about forms, form building basics, preventing form deliverability, form field integrations, AI in forms, just a ton of different topics about forms. So I would say that you could give that podcast series a listen to. It's 6 episodes long. And also those 2 websites, WS Forms and Fluent Forms, have a huge amount of information on their own websites, including use cases and how-to guides. So hopefully that helps. Jackie asked in the chat, what about using Acrobat to build a web form? I would not use Acrobat to build a web form. A question kind of regarding what is. She's asking what WP Engine is. WP Engine is a hosting company, although they do own several tools, including tools like ACF, which is Advanced Custom Fields, which they bought recently. I will ask if anyone else has any more questions. Again, if you have a longer question, you can just put a question mark in the chat. And if you have a short question, you can just quick type it in. I'll give everyone about 30 seconds. Greta, you had a question. I've sent you a request if you want to unmute. Hi, Greta.
Hi, I had asked a question before the last person. Let me go back. I had asked about cadence in Gutenberg.
Cadence blocks for Gutenberg.
Yeah, I was kind of confused. I had sat in on a webinar once where both of them were discussed, but now I'm trying to remember if it was recommended to use. It might be a dumb question. I don't know if they're both the same or.
So Gutenberg is what is actually built into WordPress. So you can use Gutenberg immediately. You don't need to add on anything else. What some people like to do is they like to add more features to Gutenberg. So they will add on something like cadence blocks to it.
Okay, because typically
which
I've been
give you some more features.
okay, because typically the page builder I've been using is Elementor, but I had sat in one time about cadence blocks, and I'm trying to remember if that was supposed to be better than using something else with Gutenberg, or
Generally
using-
speaking, this is a big generalization. If you're using a block kind of add-on, it is generally going to be a little cleaner on the code and maybe a little lighter on the loading speed than some of the full-featured builders such as Elementor. That's a generalization. There are always exceptions to the rule.
Okay, so
Sometimes that's why people will choose to go with adding blocks to Gutenberg rather than using a completely separate page builder like Elementor.
and previously you stated that, well, I know the Gutenberg platform was modernized. It's better than it used to be or whatever, has more functionality.
Yes. Yes.
So,
When it first came out, there were a lot of issues. It has become more stable and more reliable over the years.
okay, which is perfectly fine not to have to use blocks, is what you're saying, a block plugin. You should be able to, you can do a lot more.
Correct. You can do a lot
Okay.
more without adding. Think of Gutenberg as a really simple Lego set. You've got just a few basic blocks, and then think of plugins such as Cadence Block as just a bunch more different Legos that you can put in.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. We will give one more ask. If anyone has any more questions, I'll leave it open for about 30 seconds before we wrap. Okay, it looks like no one else has any more questions for this evening. So I have put a link into the chat for the WordPress Meetup page. If you have any questions outside of these time slots or you want more information about the Meetup group. And our next meetup is on September 21st, and that is a co-meetup with a group down in Florida. You can RSVP at the group page. And have a good night, everyone.